All right, very good. Thank you all for being here. I look forward to going through this presentation. I had about 1,000 pictures, and I'm not going through 1,000 pictures today, but that was very hard to cut that back. In fact, when I showed my family over Thanksgiving, I didn't even go through the 1,000 pictures because we had some shared pictures from the group, and I used some of those today, and then some I took, but that took about an hour and a half to go through the pictures I did with them. I've got this down to about 69 pictures, so some of them we're just going to be going through quickly, and some I'll stop and talk about for a minute. But I appreciate the prayers for my trip. I appreciate the elders allowing me to go. And it is one of those deals where I paid my own way and didn't raise any money or anything, because it was not just entirely a mission trip. There was obviously some sightseeing that we did, and I got to go to some places I hadn't been before, and I was really encouraged about that. But I went with a group out of Lubbock, Texas called Disciple Trips, and they're connected with Sunset International Bible Institute. It's one of their ministries and overseen by the elders of the Sunset Church of Christ in Lubbock, Texas. So most of the folks that went were from the Lubbock area and from that congregation. My friend John Hackett from Hohenwald and I went out of Nashville, and we met the folks over in Greece. All right, I'm going to turn this on, and then it'll work, Mark. There we go. All right, so I wanted to start with, we got there, the other group got there on Saturday night. John and I had to leave on Saturday night, so we got there Sunday afternoon, about an hour and a half before church. They have two services at the Everett Church of Christ, and this is us going into, it's basically like a storefront to the Everett Church of Christ that evening. But there are a few churches of Christ in the Athens area. This is one that does a lot of outreach to refugees, along with the Glyphada Church of Christ, which is sort of a suburb of Athens. But they have a Greek-speaking service in the morning, and then they have an English service at night. I think I mentioned that. And the English service is for varied ethnicities, varied nationalities. And so that's the one we went to that night. Of course, we wouldn't have been there that morning for the Greek service because we didn't get there till that afternoon. We didn't, John and I didn't get any sleep on the way there, so we were fairly sleepy, but it was interesting. We stayed awake, so I had to stay awake for the preacher, that night. So this is some of us going in to the Everett Church of Christ. These little girls are one of the minister's daughters. They have grown up in Greece. Their father and mother are from Kenya, but they were as sweet as they could be. And the lady with them is named Janet, and she's from Lubbock, Texas. And she's a retired teacher. She was really sweet. But I'll tell you this, children are children wherever you go. So this was our group that went, the Disciple Trips group there at the front of the church. The man at the front is one of the preachers for the Everett Church of Christ. He actually is Greek. His name is Benny, B-E-N-I, and I cannot remember how to pronounce his last name. And if I pronounced it, it would probably be wrong. But I'll have to go back and look it up. He and I exchanged emails, and he sent me some photos also. But he was actually leading singing at the time because one of our men that was leading the trip spoke that night. But Benny did a great job. So he's Greek speaking, that's his first language, but he was leading singing in English and really, really did well. But it was funny because of English being his second language, maybe his third language, I don't know. I think he knows more than one. He would put kind of emphasis on the words. It would sometimes be a lot different than the way we wouldn't necessarily say the words. But he would stop and talk about the song sometimes. They didn't really have windows going to the outside, just much like we don't have windows, to the outside of the auditorium here. but they had like stained glass and that sort of thing. This was us with the entire church that was there that night. Now, I wanted to say something about, they had a few less people that night, and they said they had very few that morning because the marathon was this weekend when we got there. When you think about marathon from Marathon, like from the city of Marathon, Greece, to Athens. And there are people that come from all over the world, just like they do the Boston Marathon or the New York Marathon. They want to go to Greece and run that marathon. And so even when we were going to church that night, we had roads closed, and you couldn't go down these roads. And so it was really hard for some people to get to the church if you didn't live nearby. And so it was basically the people that lived nearby that came. But folks from Philippines, Kenya, Nigeria, Pakistan, there was a Greek-speaking lady. There were a couple more nationalities I couldn't remember. And then there was like I kidded the group, I said, then there was the nation of Texas that was there too. So they kind of feel that way. The next day, we went to ancient Corinth. And so I had obviously lots and lots of pictures of ancient Corinth, but I think I chose about 10 for this morning. This is going down into ancient Corinth. And you notice we're going down into it. And when you're in the ruins of ancient Corinth, you actually can see that they have gone down what's essentially about 3 stories from what was the city that's there now. And when they excavated, the American school excavated in the 1800s, toward the late 1800s, and started digging down. They probably will never uncover all of ancient Corinth because houses have been built on top of ancient Corinth. And so a lot of the new city is built on top of the old city. Athens is interesting too. We went in the subway, and they have places within the subway stations where they've got glass floors, and you can look down where they've excavated and found. I mean, they're just going to find something wherever they dig in Greece. And so ancient Athens is basically, or ancient Corinth, basically what you see now is what you're going to be able to see, because they're not going to, tear down schools and that sort of thing to find other things. Ephesus is a different story, and when we get there, I'll tell you about it. This is essentially a storefront in the marketplace at Corinth. Would have been possibly even where Paul and Aquila and Priscilla had set up their shop. It may not have been that one. This is just one of many that are set up there in the marketplace. But this definitely dates back to Paul's day. And I'm sure it looked a lot more polished at the time because it's ruins, obviously, we're looking at. This is mentioned in the book of Acts. It's the bema, or the judgment seat of Gallio. And Paul is taken before the judgment seat. You'd have to imagine, and our guide kind of had what they thought the pictures would look like. You have to imagine columns and a roof and polished marble and all that, and you've basically got this proconsul, this magistrate, sitting there at the top looking down at Paul. And he, of course, if you know the story, for the book of Acts, he says, I'm not going to have anything to do with this. I'm not going to have anything to do with your Jewish laws. And really interesting thing on my last trip to Greece that I got to see, that's a very important artifact. Thank you, yeah. Thank you for the help. Archaeological was what I was trying to come up with, but I had by the way, I got in about 1 last night from Huntsville because Kristen's stepmother was in the hospital last night. So if my brain's a little bit sluggish, that's why. We got her home about midnight. But anyway, in Delphi, there's a museum where they have the Gallio inscription. There was this controversy for a few centuries, basically people were saying that Gallio didn't really exist, that he wasn't a real person because he only served for like a year as the proconsul of Achaia in that area. But they actually found a inscription from Seneca, who was his brother. Many people have heard of Seneca, who was a senator in Greece, who had written about him, and so he was a real person for sure. But that was the judgment seat. You probably can't see this. Part of it's in Greek. It was not originally there with Paul, okay? So we know this, but part of it's in English. For the slight momentary affliction is preparing for us an eternal weight of glory beyond all comparison. You remember Paul writing that to the Corinthian Christians, so the top part's in Greece. But this was not added in the 20th century. We don't know exactly how old this was, but this was put up sometime later. Just more ruins from Corinth. You can sort of see the depth or the height of the landscape and see how far they've dug down, finding different things. Back in the back, the columns in the back are what's left of a temple to Apollo. He's not around anymore. He was never around. And I think it's interesting. In fact, my last slide will be a picture of our group in front of that temple because I kind of wanted to remind myself and remind all of us, hey, Apollo never was a real god, and those temples, got torn down. This mountain at the very top is a fortress, and the fortress has been rebuilt a few times, but the one that's up there now was built about the 1400s. I didn't show a picture here of the fortress, but the reason I wanted to show the mountain is because up toward the rocky part of that mountain would have been the temple of Aphrodite that was in Corinth. And so Paul talks about that. Those temple prostitutes would have walked down from that mountain down to the port, which would have been a couple of miles down to meet the ships. And these ships were coming from all over the world. Our guide, who was Greek, was quick to tell us that she said, "I'm not a pagan," so she said, "I'm a Christian, so I wouldn't worship these gods." She said, but Aphrodite outside of Corinth really didn't have a bad reputation as far as people kind of like, it was more like love and marriage and this kind of thing. She said, but in Corinth it was a bad thing. And so it was very, very much, when Paul talks about joining yourself to, a prostitute and that sort of thing, 1 Corinthians chapter 6, these people knew exactly what he was talking about, and that was a problem. So this was an aqueduct with fresh water that would have been there, and would have been very important for the ships coming in to get fresh water, to exchange fresh water and that sort of thing. And this was discovered not long ago. All right, you're thinking, why did he take a picture of this rock? Okay. So what it says to begin with on the kind of worn down part is synagogue of the Hebrews is what it is. And so Paul, of course, went to the synagogue first in Corinth. And so they don't know exactly where, they don't remember exactly where this was in Corinth, but they had found this in Corinth. And so there was the synagogue of the Hebrews. That would have been the sign that would have been there, the synagogue of the Hebrews, and where Paul would have first taught. And then, of course, he went to the school of Tyrannus and taught next to that. But I've gotten to see that twice. And the first time I went in 2019, the guide said, "Hey, you know Greek, why don't you read that?" But I was like, but I can't see the first part of it. But that's pretty moving when you see that. So this is going out of the city into this is going out of the ruins into the current city of Corinth. This pavement, the vast majority of it would have been there in the time of Paul, because this was covered up for centuries. There are a few places where there's modern cement where they filled in, but very few places. Most of it is what the road would have looked like, what the open area would look like that he would have walked on. I really can't imagine how ornate. Our guide again tried to show us pictures of what it probably would have looked like, but it would have been polished marble up and down. It would have been a very important city. Ancient Corinth was destroyed and then reestablished by Julius Caesar. And so it was a very prominent city. The fact that we have 2 letters in the New Testament to the church at Corinth is, shows really its prominence as a major city. So Corinth was a major city. There is a Church of Christ that meets in Corinth today. So I think that's an important thing to mention. All right. Over here these were all found when they excavated the city, okay, and they probably go back to the 1st century, more than likely. This was supposed to be Caesar Augustus, the statue, Julius Caesar in the middle, and Nero, the head of Nero here on the side. So I think it's interesting when you look at Nero. And I'm sure he commissioned this himself, this bust. He's made to look pretty attractive as far as, his hair is all flowing and stuff. But even those folks considered him crazy. So he was not a well-loved emperor by any stretch. And of course, Caesar looks a little more serious. But okay, why am I showing you body parts? There's a whole room of excavated body parts. They're not body parts, okay? They're sculptures of body parts. These were not broken off of some sculpture. They were just found as legs, okay? There are lots of other body parts that are found, fingers, toes, other things. What does Paul write about in 1 Corinthians chapter 12? He talks about the parts of the body. It was a big thing for people to come to Corinth to be healed. They thought that some of these pagan priests and pagan physicians could heal them. And when they were treated, it was common for them to basically present the part of the body they wanted to be treated, the people that would come. Or if they were given successful treatment, they thought they would give parts of the body. I will say that these parts were the least offensive parts for me to show. From that room. And so Corinth was a wicked place. Very wicked place. On Tuesday evening, we had a men's fellowship. This is my friend John Hackett from the Lomax Church in Hohenwald. And we had this meeting at 5 o'clock, which was a little tough for the folks in the area to come to because many of them were getting off work after 5 o'clock. So it was a mix of the men from our group, but we had men from that congregation and some other congregations that were of different nationalities that came. So we had some folks from Greece. We had this young man in the black shirt is from Ukraine. He lives there. He's been living there for several years. This man's from Pakistan in the yellow shirt, and this is Peter Ozu, who is from Kenya, but also was one of the ministers at the church, at the Avery Church. Really fantastic guy. His little girls were the ones I showed the picture of earlier. And then this man is a doctor from Childress, Texas, and he's an elder in the church in Childress, Texas. Really neat guy. He was interesting to get to know because he's in a small town in Texas, and he is one of these family physicians that still delivers babies and does general surgery and all that kind of stuff. So, okay, I don't know who that guy is, so let's keep going. All right, that was me talking with my hands. These were the men that were at the fellowship on Tuesday night. We had a good time, not just having discussion with the lessons, but we had a time of fellowship like we showed a while ago. One thing was interesting, when we had the break in the middle with the fellowship, it was almost all sweets. Some of you would have loved that. I mean, it was just sweets everywhere. All right. So I went to one coffee shop while I was there, which is unusual. Usually I go to more than one coffee shop. But the folks over here are from Headley, Texas. He's a retired judge. She's a retired lawyer, and or I should say lawyer. And my friend John in the middle. Of course, I'm in the back. The guy over here on the other side is Ibrahim. Y'all have actually heard me talk about him before. He's the young man that grew up in Iran. His father left at a young age. He wound up on the street in Iran, ended up getting into trouble, like legitimate trouble, ran from the law. He fled to Turkey. He was about 18 years old. He winds up in Greece and then winds up in a refugee camp. There he is taught the gospel. And these folks helped pay for him to start attending Sunset International Bible Institute. They had gone over back about 2017 to do some what's called Let's Start Talking and do some teaching with Farsi-speaking people there. And Ibrahim served as their interpreter at the time. He does speak about 6 languages fluently, and he now preaches for the Farsi-speaking church there in Glafada, Greece. Just a neat guy, really, really fantastic guy. He's got a podcast now. I mean, he does all kinds of things. You can follow him on Facebook if you want to. So, neat guy. But we got to visit with him. He was busy the whole time, but he basically came and met us for coffee on Wednesday morning. Wednesday night, we went back to the church, and Peter taught us the Bible study lesson on unity and diversity. It was so interesting because the diverse group of people that were there. I mean, you had people from all these different nations, and he was talking about unity and diversity. It wasn't like you like Alabama and I like Tennessee, that kind of diversity. It wasn't like, well, you're from this state and I'm from this state. I mean, these people from different countries spoke different languages, and they're all different parts of the body. And so that was very interesting. You notice he goes from 1 Corinthians chapter 12 too, which in Ephesians chapter 4. The picture on the other side is just some of their little girls from their Bible class. And it's in Greek. It basically says our little angels. And all little girls. They're like us. It's like all girls. It's not, they don't have any real boys. It's girls. But some of them are Greek names. A lot of the folks from Kenya and Nigeria, they'll name their children like Purity and things like that. It's pretty neat. This is Peter teaching. Did a fantastic job teaching about unity and diversity. We had great discussion. And like I said, I talked to him when we were in ancient Corinth. He went with us to ancient Corinth, and he's been in Greece for about 17 years. So he and Benny, the man that was leading singing earlier, run the Athens Bible Institute, which is affiliated with Sunset Bible Institute, and they actually have graduates every year who go on to, some of them move to other countries and preach, but a lot of them are doing work in and around Greece. They move in and around Greece and do work. These are the 2 preachers' wives. I just thought you'd want to see them. They were super sweet ladies. So one's Greek and one's Kenyan. And they get along really well. This is not the Parthenon in Nashville. This is the actual Parthenon. By the way, the Greek guides they have to have master's degrees to be guides in Greek. If you're from Tennessee and you start joking about the real Parthenons in Nashville, they don't really think that's as funny as you think it is. But it's interesting because the Parthenon we have in Nashville in Centennial Park is very much a replica. And when you go and you look in and you see that statue of Athena, that's probably a lot what it would have looked like in Greece. So there is, in a few years, hopefully not going to be any more scaffolding up, but they have been working on rebuilding this for decades now. They are trying to put part of the roof back on. They're not going to put all of the roof back on. But if you don't know, this was blown up basically in warfare against the Ottoman Turks in the 1800s. And so there was explosives stored in there, and so that's why it's more in ruins than it would be. Our guide, who's also has a degree in archaeology and history, she said that the rule is they have to use 70% original material. They can only use 30% new material when they're reconstructing. And so there's just parts and pieces of the Parthenon lying all around it. And they have to go and try to find what fits into what column and so forth. These are original statues that were on the Temple of Nike up on the Acropolis. They're missing one, and it's in the British Museum. And they're trying to get the British to give it back. But that is looking out from the Acropolis where the Parthenon is and the other temples over the modern-day city of Athens. When Paul was there, it probably would have been about 200,000 people, which is significant, obviously. Now it's about 4 million people. That's how much it has grown. This is an auditorium. Why is it an auditorium and not an amphitheater? Because it had a roof on it. And they're not going to put a roof back on it, but it's called an auditorium because it at one point would have had a wooden roof on top of it. But they still have concerts in this place. They have people, big name concerts, like Pavarotti has sung there, and those of you who love the Police, Sting has sung there. So Sting actually goes to Greece. I found out and he's been to Ephesus and Turkey also, and whatever proceeds he gets from these concerts, he gives back to the reconstruction of these places. So I thought that was the restoration. This is basically the entrance to the Acropolis. So all this would have still been standing. This has never been torn down. Going up to where the Parthenon is, those are the replicas that they have on the Temple of Nike. One thing our guide says was the Parthenon was sort of the big, kind of got all the publicity, but the Temple of Nike is where the real worship happens. The other place was not so much for worship. Okay, these steps are original steps going up to the Acropolis, and so the Apostle Paul, all the other folks that would have gone at that time would have gone up these steps. They're covered up now by a wooden ramp or wooden set of steps, so people can't just go and wear them down. They have been for some time, but they know for sure that it dates back to the original time so it would have predated Paul. But we took pictures of that. All right. That impressive looking place is Mars Hill. That's where the Areopagus, would have met. It's not the Areopagus, it's Mars Hill. The Areopagus was the gathering of the city leaders. So that's where they would have met. Did they have benches at one time? I don't know. They're just rocks. I mean, they're just big boulders, and that's where you sit. You go and you sit on these big boulders, and you'll see during my sermon too, but I just wanted one big headshot. The scale of my head versus the Parthenon, which one do you think is bigger? I don't know, but the Parthenon's a little bit bigger. That's the side of the Parthenon. So this is at the bottom of Mars Hill. That engraving is in Greek. It is from Acts 17. It's Paul's sermon on Mars Hill. It's pretty neat to be there with that. This is on top of Mars Hill. Some of our folks are up there. So you can see from Mars Hill that you look up at the Acropolis and the Parthenon and all that. So you can look up at all the temples, but then you can also look down on the city. And so it was sort of why they met there, very likely is because they felt like they were between God and the people, if that makes sense. The people are down here in the marketplace, the city is down there, the gods are up here. And so they met sort of between the gods and the people. This is love and serve without boundaries. Some of our ladies went on Tuesday and worked here. A lady that's a member of the Everett Church runs this ministry. And we went there on Thursday and served all day long. And I've got a few pictures from here. So love and serve without boundaries. So I'll try to make this very quick. Rosemary is the lady that runs this. I think I've told a little bit of this story in a sermon maybe a week or two ago. But her husband, they were from Kenya. Her husband lived in Greece for like 6 years. They were trying to work it out for her and the children to come over. Finally, he said, sell the farm, y'all move over. She moves over. About a month later, he dies of a mysterious illness. And she's destitute. She doesn't know the language. She doesn't have any kind of work visa. She doesn't have anything. And so she's there with her 3 teenage children. You can imagine what it's like to have teenage children anyway. And then she's there with 3 teenage children, 2 boys and a girl. The girl's older. I got to meet her daughter, Lavender is her name. She's super sweet. And she was feeling sorry for herself, and she thought the best thing she could do is just to go out and start helping people. So she started, I'm going to be as delicate as I can, but she started going out to the street corners to meet ladies to say, you don't have to do this, I'll help you, I'll teach you how to work, I'll do this. And she started inviting these folks into her home, and they would just have water at night. They didn't have anything to eat. They would have water and go to sleep and go forth. But she eventually, she just kept getting people to help her and somebody, not a member of the church, somebody donates this space now because of the good work she's done. She paid rent for a long time, and he said, you're not going to pay rent anymore, you're just doing such good work. And so mainly she gives out kind of 2 different things. For older people, and I would count as an older person in Greece that didn't have a lot or whatever, I may not have a pension or may not have anything else, she gives food once a week to those folks. And a lot of the refugees or immigrant folks from Egypt, Somalia, other places like that, from different parts of Africa, she gives diapers and wipes. And they can do that for 6 months. And so that's as long as she serves anybody. She doesn't do it indefinitely. She tries to help you for about 6 months. The back there was just full of donations. Well, I'll put that in quotation marks. Full of donations. Basically, people, they were throwing things out and they thought she could use it. And my friend John, who has spent a lot of time in Kenya since he was 18 years old, he said, the Kenyan folks don't believe in not accepting a gift if somebody gives you a gift or a donation. And some of that stuff we just hauled to the dump. You know, we just threw it out. But we were back there. We didn't find the actual mice and rats, but we found plenty of evidence of them. You know, I was doing a lot of dusting off of things. I did have gloves on, but looking for it. But it was just back there. I mean, even somebody gave her a ping pong table. I don't think she's ever going to use it, but we were just clearing that out. But she also has a lot of diapers from the UN Relief Agency and so forth. Lady from Egypt with her 2 children. We didn't really interact with her. The men didn't. The women did. It's not, these women who are from Islamic backgrounds, it's not appropriate for the men to interact with them. But women can interact with them. So she didn't mind having her picture taken, though, so that was nice. These little girls are both from Nigeria, and they were a mess. And that's Rosemary that's smiling there. And she still has a lot of rough things going on in her life, but she pours into these children. So she teaches English a couple nights a week to these children, and they spoke really, really good English. Just various pictures. This tarp here is just full of water and leaves, and it's just barely covering, but she has to cover the stuff because it's an open courtyard that the people in the apartments up above can look down and see, and she has to keep everything just from being exposed so they don't see it, plus trying to keep it dry. He's breakdancing, by the way, the little boy from Ethiopia, and he was really good at breakdancing. He'd probably be in the Olympics if they keep that. But boys from Ghana, from Ethiopia, from Sierra Leone, and their common language is all English, and it was really cute. Okay, this is ancient Ephesus, not what you think of. The reason I'm showing this is because, and our guide there had been an archaeologist at Ephesus, and so that was a pretty neat thing. Because of all the modern technology like ground penetrating radar and all that, they have figured out the boundaries of ancient Ephesus, and they basically go up 2 large hills, and ancient Ephesus that's been excavated is down in the valley. and they figured out that they've only excavated 10% of ancient Ephesus. And so they still have a lot to excavate. Ancient Ephesus was the second largest city in the Roman Empire. So it was very important. And it was so important that this is the remains of a temple that Emperor Domitian had built for himself. It was the first known temple to an emperor in the Roman Empire. Nobody liked him. So he wasn't liked by anybody. Depending on your view of Revelation, he may have been the one who exiles John to Patmos. Probably something to do with 95, 96 AD, something like that. But we definitely know at some point this plays in pretty big into the Christians' lives when they're not going to worship the emperor. Okay? This was the remains of what they figured out was a hospital in Ephesus, which is pretty important. Just an arch that was pretty impressive. Trust me, I'm not showing you nearly what I could from Ephesus. This is going uphill or downhill, depending on how you would think. But basically, you would have entered Ephesus kind of up on the top of a hill and started coming down. It wasn't raining that day, which we were thankful because he said it would have been really slick. It's marble. The streets are marble, much like they were in Corinth, except it's got a slope. And I can only imagine these columns and colonnades and roofed top buildings and all that, just how impressive that would have been. This is a part of what have been basically on a temple to Nike, probably in Ephesus. Nike, you see, has got the wreath. It's Nike spelled just like the shoe, okay, or the shoe company. Our guide was funny. He said he's written to the Nike Corporation several times trying to get them to fund some of the. He said, just give us $1 million a year to dig in Ephesus. And he said they won't do it, so he wears New Balance. This was the library, the Celsius Library. It was one of three major libraries of the ancient world. Alexandria was one of them, if you remember the Alexandria Library. It also burned. The Celsius Library burned. The Library at Alexandria burned. He mentioned another one that all of a sudden I can't remember. Somebody else will know. But we think about the Dark Ages. So much understanding was lost because of what was burned when these libraries were torn down. This was just mosaic sidewalk. Pretty impressive looking. It wasn't throughout the city. It was just in certain parts of it. He said this would have been where the posh areas were, where the real nice shops were, where the wealthy people would have been in Ephesus. Just part of a structure that's left. I just thought the engraving was pretty important. You know, they would engrave scenes. This was actually an engraving of the conquering of the Roman Empire, basically. If you think about it, most people didn't read. And so this would have been how they communicated sort of the conquering and the victory and so forth. This is a menorah that was found engraved on the steps of the library. More of the mosaic floor, part of the library. This is my friend John reading in the marketplace in Ephesus from the book of Acts. This is my big head again in front of the library. I should have worn that hat every day because it was sunny. This is one cat from Ephesus. I'm going to show you another cat in a minute. This is part of the marketplace, what's left of it. This is what you think it is. It's an outhouse. But it wasn't really an outhouse. This was a covered public toilet where many of the wealthy men would have come. And he said they would have sent a slave to warm up the seat before they went. And I mean, it was flowing water in the front. It was a ditch in the back. It was pretty crazy. This is an entrance into the amphitheater. This would have been a statue left of Claudius Caesar standing on what have been the world. So they thought the world was round, even back then. The library, really impressive. That is Garfield of Ephesus. She is a cat who has her own Instagram page. And she is one of the most famous cats in the world. She came over to me and let me pet her. So, the amphitheater at Ephesus. You remember some of the brothers were drug into the amphitheater. It holds about 24,000 people. We couldn't go into it because they're restoring it. You used to could go into it, but now they're restoring it. So the scale of it is really mind-blowing to be there. This is the Isle of Patmos. Patmos, when John was there, wouldn't have had much of anything. Now it has about 3,000 people that live there, but this would very likely have been the scene about where John would have stood or been exiled. He just looked out over the landscape. This is depictions of going into a church that's built on the cave where they think John was. We could take no pictures inside the cave, inside the church, but this is the closest I could get to taking any kind of picture, and it's scenes from the book of Revelation, if you think about it. This is a monastery that's built there at Patmos from the 1700s. St. John's Monastery, if that makes sense. This is the picture of what has been built over the cave, a church structure that's been built over the cave there at Patmos. Of course, John, it really was even more moving to go from Ephesus, which is this big major city, and you see that John was exiled from Ephesus. So John and Paul would have both walked through those streets of Ephesus, but John was exiled from this major city in the Roman Empire to this little island. Okay, last slide. This is back in Corinth in front of the Temple of Apollo, and just the ruins in our group there. We got about 4 or 5 minutes probably, so anybody got any questions about anything? And I can answer them outside of this too, just anybody that wants to ask me any questions. But that was a lot to go through in a short time. I skipped a lot. So. Who destroyed the libraries? They don't actually know if anybody intentionally destroyed them or if it was an accidental fire. That's one of those things I'm sure somebody got blamed for at the time, but the idea is they don't know exactly how they were burned. But if you imagine there's all these lambskin, scrolls, and they've got oil on them from your hands and all that, and people are going in with a lamp to read. So you're taking fire in around all those scrolls. I think it was going to happen at some point. I think that's because you weren't supposed to take them out of the library to take them anyway. So, well, I guess we're out of time. All right. Thank you all. I'm happy to answer any questions later. I enjoyed going. I enjoyed talking about it, and I am going to do probably next year a sermon series on Ephesus. For 2 reasons. I've been to Ephesus, but I also took a doctoral course on the book of Ephesus, and I really have wanted to dig more into that in a sermon series. So we're going to do